Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Cabral Concept. I'm Stephen Cabral, board-certified naturopathic doctor, and if you tuned into yesterday's episode, you would have heard me explain why I have this low, deep voice right now, and I am recovering from 20 days of straight speaking, many hours per day, at least 8 hours per day. Luckily, this weekend, I'm going to be resting my voice. I'll be back and good as new on Monday. It's been a great last 20 days working with hundreds of people, speaking every weekend at seminars, and again, meeting a lot of great people on the East Coast and West Coast. But that is why I have this deep voice right now. So I'm recording this, just recorded my previous one, and then again, resting my voice. So if it's a little disturbing to you, I promise it should be back to normal on Monday. All right, let's get started with today's house call. Let's get started with today's questions. And the first question today is from Dan. Dan's asking, should everyone be drinking bone broth? So today's show, I really like today's episode, is because I grouped these three questions today to give you the pros and cons about very popular food-based items that are being used every day that are touted as everyone in the world should use them. So I feel like a lot of times I'm the only one who gives you the downsides to using foods and other items in general. And the reason is I think a lot more people have an agenda of trying to sell you something, or they don't look into the research of the cons of certain things. So what I want to do is I want to actually talk to you today about the pros and cons to both. So I use all of these things and I use everything in my practice, but you always have to remember there's no all for one, meaning like 100 people out of 100 can never use the same protocol. That's just not the way it works. Our bodies, yes, we all have the same organs, the digestive system, but they work in a little different way. So when you're looking at bone broth, some people can't use the skin in broth because of histamine-based issues. So if you have issues with high histamine, like acid reflux or hives or potentially bloating or itchy eyes or allergies or migraines, well, even adding meat or garlic or onions or skin to your bone broth can cause real issues in terms of mast cell production and histamines. So that would be a downfall. Now, you could just use straight bones with distilled water and do that over a period of 24 hours on low and just kind of breaking down the bones. That could work. And then you could add some celery and carrots, but you would not be able to add the onions and the garlic, the peppercorns, or the meat or the skin, which a lot of people do for the gelatin. So again, it's looking at, so no, not everyone should be drinking bone broth, but bone broth is high in glycine and it can help repair the gut. It's also high in minerals from all of the bones. So I do love people to drink bone broth, especially like 1 cup of warm or hot bone broth with a meal, or better between meals, to help repair that gut, but not if they have high histamines. So Dan, hopefully that answers your question and gives you a little bit of leeway as to who should drink it and who not. And keep in mind, I'm a GAPS-based practitioner, but they recommend bone broth to everyone. I know for myself, a decade ago, I couldn't drink bone broth because I had high histamines. And so just keep in mind, not everyone can follow the same protocol. And that's why you need to find out what works best for you. Okay, Dawn is up next. Dawn is asking, probiotics, where should I start? What should I be taking? Really great question. And I should probably do a whole episode on probiotics, which I will in the future. But what I want to let you know is this. Probiotics are fantastic. Almost everyone should be taking them. But what strains do you take, right? Because there are hundreds of strains to take. There are actually billions of strains to take, but we don't know them all yet. So when we're looking at this, we do know that there's 100 trillion bacteria in the gut, and there's only 40 trillion of us. That means there's more bacteria in our body than there is of actually human cells. Pretty remarkable. But you have to understand there's two main differences in the bacteria in the gut. The small intestine is different than your large intestine. They are separated by something called the ileocecal valve. That means that valve keeps the bacteria in the large intestine where it's supposed to be, coming out of your body. That's the end part, the last 5 feet to 6 feet. And the small intestine is the first part of the intestines, and that's totally different, and that has a totally different bacteria. So I'm going to explain what those are right now. So the small intestine is supposed to have strains of bacteria that begin with the word lactobacillus. So when you're looking at the back of your probiotic bottle, you'll see something that says lactobacillus, and then it could end with a specific strain, like acidophilus, plantarum, reuteri, rhamnosus, salivarius, and a bunch of others. And now those can all be fantastic. The issue is the colon-based strains, which a lot of times you'll see as well. Those begin with bifidobacterium, and they end with things like lactis, bifidum, and those are colon-based strains. So when you think about it like this, because really over half of my practice is digestive-based issues. I work with SIBO, Crohn's, colitis, IBS, yeast-based overgrowth, intestinal-based permeability, leaky gut, all of those things, right? And so really I fine-tuned this and really mastered it over the period of the last 5 years. And what I found is this, that too many people are putting the colon-based bacteria, the bifidobacterium, into their mouth that has to go through their stomach and the small intestine and then eventually land in their large intestine. But the problem is when they have small intestinal-based issues and not enough good bacteria, the colon-based bacteria actually sticks to the small intestine, creating more issues, more bloating, more gas, more all of those things. So you have to be very careful with that. So are probiotics great? Yes. But when you're working with, and I'm going to do a whole show on this, but when you're working with digestive issues, you really want to start with the strain Lactobacillus acidophilus, and you want to start with the dairy-free brand, and then work your way up to more small intestinal-based strains, and then you can add in larger strains and more colon-based strains after that. So hopefully that's the advice I can give you. And again, there's a whole-based protocol that I use, which is starting with, and you'll see it on my Candida and SIBO or small intestinal-based bacterial protocol, just at stephencabral.com/store. You'll see what we use. We use the acidophilus, then we use the multiple strains of the small intestine, and then we work up to a larger probiotic. But even before that, we start with something that's kind of like a probiotic. It's called Saccharomyces boulardii, which is a beneficial yeast that helps push out bad yeast, bad bacteria. And that's a great place and a great one to start with as well. So, Don, hopefully that answers your question. And really, I'm thinking about it now, and this really needs to be a whole episode. So I'm going to turn this into a much larger episode and really call it like everything you always want to know about probiotics. You know, where to begin, what to do, and it will talk about the gut and how to heal the gut using probiotics. So great question. And again, when in doubt, just start with those lactobacillus-based strains and then work your way up and see if those work for you. Because, you know, the other part of it is this, that I just spoke about it in the last question, that some probiotics actually increase histamine production, okay, like Lactobacillus casei. So when you look at those, you also want to understand that there's so many nuances to probiotics that it's not that cut and dry. All right. So Jessica's up next. She's asking, should everyone be eating fermented foods? So I bet you can guess my answer by now. It says yes for some people, no for others. So let's talk about why you can and should be eating fermented foods. So fermented foods contain a lot of natural-based strains of probiotics. And instead of just being in the billions, they contain trillions of probiotics. So you're just getting such a large amount of good bacteria in your gut that you wouldn't be able to get necessarily from even a good probiotic. But there's a downfall now to fermented foods. So, well, let's step back. So why do we ever create fermented foods? Now keep in mind, fermented foods, we know they date back to at least 8,000 years ago. They fermented cheese, they fermented wine, they fermented other things of that nature. And hundreds of years ago, they started fermenting many different types of vegetables as well to basically pickle them or cure them so that they would last for during the cold season, during the winter. And they pickle fish or they ferment fish in Alaska. And again, just to be able to preserve it. But what happens when you do that? Well, you're actually eating, a lot of people don't think of this, you're eating rotten food, right? And I know that doesn't sound appetizing, but that's what it is. The food is actually rotted. You're eating the bacteria, but the bacteria is actually a beneficial bacterial strain, but it's still bacteria. So that's what you are eating when you're eating fermented foods. But again, there are health benefits to that. So now what are the downsides to fermented foods? Well, the downsides are this, that fermented foods are highly, highly acidic. Now, that could be a good thing if you have it with a meal that you need more acidity, like a protein or something like that. That's going to better acidify the stomach and help with digestion. All right, so it could be beneficial, but if you're someone that does not have a lot of alkaline-based mineral reserves and you lean more towards acidity, which means that your body gets a little bit more wiped out because you have to use up more of your magnesium, more of your calcium, more of all of your electrolytes and minerals, that might not be the best choice for you right now, okay? Second is that fermented foods also can cause a lot of mast cell and histamine-based issues. So the same people who might not be able to do bone broth are the same people who might not be able to do fermented foods, which is why even as a GAP-based practitioner, I can't have a lot of people do fermented foods. Now, can they start with just like a half a teaspoon? Yes, but even a half a teaspoon for some people can be too much to cause those itchy eyes, the migraines, the headaches, the gut-based issues. So, again, some people can, some people can't. So that's why I recommend there is always a not one-for-all based food. And the last part I want to say is not to eat fermented foods. A lot of fermented foods come from cabbage and basically sulfur-based foods. And there are a lot of people who are sensitive to sulfur, not only because of genetic mutations, because of methionine-based issues and COMT-based issues in their genetics. You don't need to know what that means, but basically they don't process sulfur very well, and it can build up in the system. It cannot be converted very well, and even though they might need it for detoxification, it doesn't work great for them. So that's obviously not going to work. And there's a little bit of research now showing too much fermented soy, and again, most people don't eat a lot of fermented soy, but too much fermented soy, there's a possible cancer link between that and gastric-based cancer by eating too much fermented soy. So, it is one of those things, not too much fermented foods, but probably some good fermented carrots and things like that could be beneficial to people, and I don't see an issue with that. My issue is more with the histamine-based reactions. And so the same thing, that went back to Dan, that went back to Dawn, and went back to Jessica on the show is that probiotics, bone broth, and fermented foods are all fantastic. Everyone in the world can probably benefit from them someday, but in the beginning, not everyone can. And the reason is because of sensitivities, food sensitivities, histamine-based sensitivities, gut-based sensitivities, and basically like Th2, Th1 branch immune-based sensitivities. So as long as we all understand that we're all unique, that in the beginning, a lot of us are dealing with health-based issues that need to be rebalanced. And once they're rebalanced, well, then we can start to do these things at a very small amount, very, very small amount, and then gradually build up from there. If you have that mentality, you can understand that eventually fermented foods could be a good thing for you to have, maybe once a day at a small amount, or twice a day, or maybe just a few times a week. You can look at it however you want, whatever you believe will work best with your body. I personally don't eat a lot of fermented foods. I take a good probiotic, but I don't really want, care for, or need the fermented foods, and I don't believe I'm missing out in anything. However, a lot of people, it works absolutely fantastic with them. I just know my body, and I know it works for me, and I know that that's not best for my body. So hopefully that answered everyone's question today, and thank you again for tuning into this very special Cabral House Call, where not only do I have half a voice left, but I got to talk about really important topics to myself that hopefully you enjoyed as well. I'm looking forward now to resting my voice for 48 hours and being back on Monday with an absolutely fantastic, ready to go episode on our Mindset and Motivation Monday. Everyone enjoy your weekend, and I look forward to being back tomorrow.